Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel.
I decided to go with the standard straps because battery orientation is going to be different. So putting that away for later. But the battery needs to be placed upright, not flat. It fits flat, but not with the ESC moved up onto the side. And to get things to work right, that's kind of what I'm having to do. So what I did was to anchor this, I'll put some glue here, but I have an industrial stapler, just by happenstance, and so I was able to just staple this together like that, so that's not gonna come off on me. And then I can just wrap it like that. Now I'm gonna be putting Velcro on the battery and on the base here to help hold it in place. But I'm glad that I bought two of these because this I kind of bought as an experiment. I was hoping it would be light enough. I don't think there's going to be any way that it would be worth running this, because I would have to, all the extra weight would have to be added on top of this, because even this is going to not make the nose heavy enough, as you've seen. So I'm thinking about the push rod thing and whether or not I'm going to make that change over to the carbon fiber. It would definitely take a little bit of weight off the tail end there. Not a lot, but some. So I'm thinking about it, and I'll make a decision on that. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and glue this forward in the bulkhead up here. I don't know if I showed you the ESC earlier. It used to be down here. I've moved it fully up onto the side, right under the lip here, and there was a little wooden bracket that was down there that held the wires across the bottom. I've kind of moved this forward enough that the pressure of the wires kind of tucks the wires underneath the motor and along the side, so they're not going anywhere and they're not going to get into anything, and that allows me to move the battery as far forward as possible. So now I'm going to glue that in place, and then I'm going to start figuring out my electronics, where I'm going to put them. I might shorten these two wires a teeny bit, I'm not sure. What I might do is just cut off this plug and replace it with one of the higher quality Dean's connectors that I have, and that'll also allow me to solder in the BEC, and so that will power the receiver directly. So we'll see about that. And so figuring out exactly where I'm going to place these two. It looks like I might have to put them both down here. I might be able to put the receiver up front on the side wall, kind of like this. The problem is it'll be really hard to work on it if that ever comes to pass. I'm not sure. The battery is going to be a tight fit in there, but it'll fit. So I'd like to have a little space in between the battery and the ESC so that the fins get some air, but that may not be a problem. It all depends on how you fly these. If you kind of drive it like, like a hotliner, where you're, always, running on power, and you don't fly off power very much, the ESC will get really hot. If you fly it more like, like a true powered sailplane, you're using the motor to get you to altitude, you're cutting the power, and then you're thermaling around until you get low enough that you want to go ahead and run the motor again. So if I do put this on the wall up front, I'm going to have to use Velcro, because if I ever need to work on the wires, if this is a permanent resident up there, I'll never get at it. That also is a good thing for this guy here, because I can put the satellite all the way in the rear here, drill a couple of small holes in the fuselage, route the little antennas out the holes, and so those will get some coverage, and then I can run these two out the front, little whiskers, maybe one of them vertically out the top of the canopy. Not sure, still working on that. But you know, this is kind of a luxury. It's almost not necessary with the distances that I'm going to be flying, but it's still worth having. You know, it's just a little bit of extra insurance that guarantees you're going to get a connection. And the radio is capable of multiple connections simultaneously, so that it can latch on to both receivers. So why not have that extra safety? Now, I just had an interesting thought. I'll be using the loop type of Velcro on my batteries. I'll get some stick on. I probably have some around, but I'll put the hook stuff on here. And what I really ought to just do is, while this is still out, get that stapler and put a staple here and here to really lock this down to the wood, so that it can't peel up even if it's glued on, because glue doesn't always stick to the Velcro. Sometimes this back side of the Velcro is almost impervious to most adhesives. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that. That just guarantees it's there in place. I might see if I've got a longer strip. So I put that stapler to use again. It's not industrial like factory or something like that. It's the kind of thing you'd find in a nice office or wherever. You know, the kind of thing that can easily staple through 30 to 60 sheets of paper. In any event, this is a great way to anchor this down, and I may, you know, put a little glue under there, like wick some CA under there, but I think it's going to be just fine like this. So now it's time to glue it in. We're back into the process here, and I need some Velcro for these batteries. Got a couple little strips like this, but they don't need to be this wide. They don't even need to be very big, because there's a strap that's going to go around the battery, holding it down to the battery mounting deck. And so this has just got to be enough to keep the battery from sliding, because it won't be able to pull away due to the larger strap going around it. So I'm just going to cut this in half lengthwise. And then I think the best way to do these batteries is going to be to have the wire come from below and up to meet this one. Actually, it's probably better to have it facing forward and have it point back like that. Okay, so those are both done. So now to do the rear push rods. I've decided that I'm going to go with an alternate solution to these rods. They are definitely heavy by comparison to what I'm going to do. I'm going to be using some Bowden tubing, which is a very thin, flexible plastic tubing, and that will be the housing for these carbon push rods. So the real trick is running the Bowden tubing through the fuselage, and since these are already in place, it's actually quite easy. So I'm not going to worry about exact length right now. I'm going to cut a little extra, because I'll be bracing the tubing probably back this area here. But I'm just sliding the Bowden tubing over the metal rod. And then I'm going to glue it in place while this is in position. And then when I'm done, I can unscrew the servo horns and pull the metal rod out, but in the meantime it'll keep those in place. I can even use the metal rod as in basically a place to kind of just confirm where these are going to end up, and then brace the pitot tubes before I do the carbon fiber. So again, all I need to do is measure this out, leaving myself some extra. Okay, so now that they're both in, I can go ahead and just glue those in place, and then I can glue them in place here, pull out these standard metal rods, and insert the carbon rods into the pitot tubes and put on the various connectors that I plan to use. Now I'm also going to save a little weight by getting rid of these brass fittings back here, and what I'm going to put in place is I'm going to use a pair of micro clevises that I will glue onto the ends of the carbon fiber rods, and I'll discuss that process of how I go about doing that when I get to that. Now that relieves any adjustability, but up here where they attach to the servos, I'll be using a pair of these, and they have a threaded end, so they'll use another clevis at this end, but that will provide me a certain amount of adjustability. And so the trick is to cut the carbon fiber rods to the right length, where it center for the rudder and for the stab is right about the middle of the threaded area, and that way if I need to make small adjustments I can do so. So that's all there is to that. And since the tail isn't removable, having the convenience, I could say, of these brass fittings and being able to unscrew them and make adjustments really isn't necessary, because you can't remove it. So what's the point? Might as well have a solid connection back here and have the adjustment be up at this end. And any further adjustments will be made programmatically in the radio through sub-trim adjustments, and then in flight through trim adjustments. So I'm going to mix up some glue. I'm going to glue the pitot tubes there. I'll cut some stock and glue the pitot tubes in place there. So I'm going to go ahead and pause. There's nothing to this that is worth showing on video other than me mixing epoxy, which isn't very entertaining. Okay, so what I do, and I've done this on more than a couple of kits and it works great, I take the clevis. Now the plastic can be kind of slippery. Glue doesn't always adhere to it as well as one would like. The carbon fiber, is porous to a certain degree, so glues really latch on well. What I do is I take one of these little rod ends that I'm going to be using at the forward end of the push rod, and I thread it all the way into the clevis and unscrew it again, and that cuts threads into the plastic. So those threads provide a surface for the glue to grab onto, and once that is full of glue, there's no way that is going to come off the carbon fiber rod. So what I'm going to do is mix up a little epoxy with a little bit of micro balloons to just add some volume, and I'm going to put a little bit on the tube. I'm going to slide these clevises on, and then I'm going to allow them to dry. Simple as that. So now that the pitot tubes are dry at the rear and they are attached up front as well, and I may do some additional attaching to the wall, but those won't be a full crossbar. That'll just be something that goes from the side to the pitot tube. But the carbon rods are very stiff, so if I just trim the pitot tubes about here, there shouldn't be any bowing, but it never hurts to I'm going to cut the pitot tubes a little longer than I think is necessary, just to be on the safe side to start with, and if I feel that their bowing might be an issue, I'll add another anchor. But at this point I can unhook these control rods, and I can pull them out. That is our rudder. And so I'm going to take one of the control rods, the carbon fiber rods, and slide it. Well, I need to trim the pitot tube back here a little bit. I'm leaving a little extra at the rear because that's a pretty decent distance, and I may want to anchor this down with a little triangle of balsa wood just to keep things going in the right direction, but we'll see. So now I'm just pulling this out through the front of the fuselage, like so. It's just coming out the front because the carbon fiber rod is much longer than it needs to be at the moment. But I'll be trimming that to size in just a few minutes. So now I'm going to take one of the brass pins for these clevises, and I'm going to attach it to the control horn. This is always a fun task because these things are so small. And now I have to decide, am I going to go with the original hole or the one that's a little closer? I think I'm going to go with the outer one. And I just dropped it. There it is. Okay. A pair of tweezers might come in handy for this. Okay, a set of pointed tweezers will probably do better. That way I can hold it beneath the top. There we go. So now that that's in place, I'm going to want to stabilize the rudder. This is just a pair of swizzle sticks, cocktail sticks, a couple of little rubber bands, and what I do is I just put that over the control surface, and that keeps the control surface in a centered position for me while I do work at the other end of the airplane. Okay, now what I want to do is take the clevis and thread it on all the way and then back it out to about the center position. That way the threads are cut all the way down through the clevis, and that way if I have to make adjustments in either direction, it's easy to do. And I can just see the end of the control rod sticking through the clevis there. So now I can start backing this off. And again, I'm going to take it about halfway down so I can make about a couple of millimeters of adjustment in either direction. Okay, there's the screw for the servo. Where is my Oh, it's on the end of the metal rod, of course. And it looks like they've widened those out a little bit. I want to make sure that this clevis isn't going to jiggle on that hole. If it is, because they've widened it out for the metal rod, if it fits loosely, I'm going to go ahead and swap it for another control arm. I should have one that will fit that servo. Yeah, that's got a bit of jiggle to it. And I do not like that. And I don't want to put it on the closer one because it'll catch and then start to rotate. So let me pause and look for some servo arms. I've got a lot of different servo arms. Okay, so now it's time to excuse me, mark the push rod to cut it, and I'm using a different type of clevis. These little ones work great on the connections for micro servos, but even on this horn I was able to find that has the smallest holes of any of the other ones of its type that has the same size aperture here. You get just a little bit of jiggle, maybe 1 millimeter, and you don't want any play in your linkages. Any kind of play can end up with a situation where you have, I forget the exact name for it, I'm sure someone will correct me in the notes, but the idea is that you have an inconsistent neutral. When you have your rudder and you give it left rudder and it returns to center, you give it right rudder and it doesn't quite return. And that little bit of variance there is going to give you a different response depending on whether you turn left or right, or in the case of up or down, or ailerons. So you're always going to have that not quite setup where you try to trim it and then you make some maneuvers and it seems to be out of trim again, and you trim it and you make some maneuvers and it seems to be out of trim again. And that's something that you want to avoid if at all possible. So making sure that your linkages don't have any play in them is extremely important. So these little metal rods are hollow right about to the bevel point where they start narrowing down. So I'm just gonna hold this up against my rod here, and then I'm gonna make a mark, and that's where I'm gonna cut the rod. Then I can glue this on and set this in place. I don't have to worry about the inside of this not getting a grip, because that little hole there, a little bit of glue will fill that hole and that'll latch on, and this will never pull free. So this is a very nice way to do your control linkages. Also, now that I've switched to a more standard type of clevis, I don't have to worry about switching these horns. I can use the existing horns. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. I'll just pause the camera. I'll mix up a little glue, I'll glue it in place, and I'll return once this is in place. Okay, so just to demonstrate, so I'm going to need to adjust my endpoints a little bit, but 'cause I don't want it to go so far that it's starting to sweep over and start to arc the control rod. But the carbon rod is nice and stiff, works great. Definitely saved a little bit of weight there. This is considerably heavier, and both of these removed is going to take a lot of combined weight off that center of gravity. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the stabilizer. Just pull out the rod, put the carbon rod in place, rig up the connection, glue it in place, and all done. And then I can move on with the radio placement. Okay, electronics. I'm going to be running this receiver. This is an Orange RX, the R720X V2. This is discontinued now. The V3 model is out, but still a good receiver, no issues. I'm going to be running a satellite on it. And for those of you who aren't familiar, a satellite receiver is basically a secondary receiver module. You can have basically an extra pair of antennas that can point in different directions. Radio requires line of sight, so you could potentially be blocking your own signal with your own wing, especially if you've got carbon fiber. Carbon fiber blocks RF signals pretty well, so that's always a concern. The altitudes I'm going to be flying this at, I'm not sure it's even necessary, but I have it, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. I'm also going to be using this gyro, and that has a connection module that, along with a cable in between these two, allows this to be plugged into the computer, and any changes to the configuration of the gyro are done in the computer instead of having them to do them through beeps and light blinks, which makes it a lot easier to work with. Now, I was going to run all of this powered off of the primary battery instead of using the BEC that's part of the ESC, the electric speed control. Because if the speed control fails, if it burns out, it usually takes the BEC with it, which means your radio is also powerless. I know of a couple of people who've had planes crash out for that very reason. And so a BEC is an excellent way to power all of your electrical equipment without having to go through the ESC. You put this, you basically attach this to your battery leads, and where I would probably attach it would be right here. I would take this connector apart and solder this wire in there, just to clip the plug off, and then plug this into the receiver, and that would power everything from there. But this is only a 5-volt BEC. Now, this is a good BEC, and they're great for gliders. They're very small, compact, and they're supposed to be quite reliable. But because of all the electronics I'm running, and I'm running 4 servos as well, I'd like to have a more powerful output. And this receiver can handle 9.6 volts. The gyro can handle 8.4 volts. And so I have a separate LiPo. This is a 350 milliamp. It's a 2S battery. So it puts out 7.4 volts. So I'm going to run everything off of this and basically have, well, everything except for the motor. So this will power the motor strictly, and this will power the all of the electronics. So I'm just gonna strap these together, and I've already test fitted them. They fit in the airplane just fine. I think this should get my my CG to the point where I really don't need to add much extra weight, hopefully. We'll see how that goes. Do you find these videos to be helpful, useful to you? Then please help me keep this channel going by donating. Click the link up here and you can donate safely through PayPal on either a one-time or a monthly basis, your choice. Now kind of it's a matter of space. It looks like a very roomy glider, but with all this electronics and them having already put the servos in place, it kind of limits things. Personally, I would have liked to have had the servos a little further back, and that way I could have put the gyro and receiver and everything up in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my receiver and I'm going to pop the case off it, and I'm going to wrap it in some of this, which is a it's a high temp tape. They call it masking tape, but it's really not for normal masking purposes. It's more of a electrical use tape. It's like a Mylar. And so I'm going to wrap it in this and then two-sided tape it to the inside wall here. That will dramatically reduce the size of this unit, and it'll take up a lot less space. It'll make for better airflow, and it won't be an issue as much with the batteries. That's how I'm going to mount that, and the gyro needs to be facing in this direction forward, and it either has to be flat or it has to be standing straight up and down. So I'm going to mount it straight up and down in between the push rods. Excuse me. Like that. So the receiver will be up here, taped along this side of the fuselage. Batteries center mounted here. That leaves just enough room for the ESC. And I'm considering changing the way the ESC is mounted. They use two-sided, they're using Velcro tape, and I'm thinking about using two-sided tape. That'll make it a little closer to the wall, and hopefully that way it'll get a little better airflow with the batteries. Or I may try to move it a little rearward if I can, again, also to hopefully get more air across the heat sink, because you see there's a heat sink here, but that heat sink, if the battery is right up against the heat, you know, to like here where my finger is, that's about how far the battery comes rearward. That makes it very difficult to get any air across that heat sink. So I'm gonna tinker and try to get the best fitment that I can. So we'll see. But I think that's the best plan. The first safest way to run all of your equipment is to have a single battery, all for the electronics. The next best way to go is to run a standalone BEC off of your flight pack. But if the flight pack wears down enough that you're not getting enough, you know, voltage through your BEC, you can still lose your radio equipment, even if the ESC doesn't burn out completely. Also, running all that electronics together with the motor means this battery doesn't last as long. So I'd rather have the ability to soar for longer periods of time by running this battery for all of the electronics. And again, I still don't think that's going to be a problem with the center of gravity. I'm going to put all of this stuff in here in the rough positions, put the wing on, and test the CG to see how it's looking. I'm willing to bet it's still going to be a little tail heavy. So I'll let you know how that test goes. It's not easy to show that because of the size of the wing and the limited space I have in here at this work table. So okay, I just want to talk a little bit about this gyro. Interesting way things are set up. You have these two upper ports here that are marked A2, E2, G, and the other one is marked A-E-R. That is aileron, elevator, rudder. And what these two ports do, all 6 pins, unlike the normal pins where you've got ground, power, signal, these are signal, 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 signal. So you have all 3 signals for aileron, elevator, rudder, and all into one port. And likewise, your other 3 channels, your second aileron channel, if you have one, E2 is just an extra one, G for gear. In any event, that gives you 6 channels right there in 2 ports. So you just need these wires right here. And as you can see, these wires here that are the other end of that are just signal. There is no power and ground on these connectors. So the wire looks a little weird when you see it at first, but it's pretty cut and dry. Now, I'm only going to be using 4 out of those 6, aileron 1, aileron 2, rudder elevator. Okay, so now I had to solder some stuff up. One of the things you want for this is a power lead going into it, into one of these ports. So I wired up this little cable here, and what I've got is this is going to be the power that goes into the receiver here, and that's going to go in through my bind port. And then the other part of this power lead goes over to here, and then the other end right here goes to the flight pack. So the flight pack is going to power the receiver and the gyro directly through one cable. So I had to trim off the flight pack connector and crimp this up. I had to crimp up this multi-plug here. Then I needed to make a charging cable for this battery. Since this is a 2S, I'm just going to use one of my Dean's connector cables that will plug in here. This will plug in like that. And then I changed the 2 batteries both to Dean's connectors to match the Dean's connector that is on the ESC already. I could have gone with that other type of connector, the blue one, but I don't have any of those connectors. I had Dean's, so I went ahead and went with the Dean's connectors. It just makes it easy. So now that I've kind of figured out how my wiring goes, I kept the plastic on here for the moment just to have my legend. Now I can unplug, remove the plastic case, wrap this in tape, which will make it much smaller, and then I can attach that to the side of the fuselage. Run these 2 wires under the servos. These are my 2 aileron cables. Rudder elevator are right here. Now I'm using these because I don't want to be, I'm not going to be able to move this gyro once it's in place. It's got to be firmly attached so it can't move around and wiggle, and it's got to be in a very specific position, and it's got to be facing forward. So when I'm taking the wing on and off, I need to be able to plug in the left and right ailerons, and trying to plug them into this amongst other wires would be difficult, whereas with these 2 cables here, these are just extensions, I can go ahead and plug directly into here, and that sets that up. So a lot of little things. This is one of the reasons right here why having a crimp kit, having a crimping tool, and a cabling kit of at least one type is really handy to have, because much as I hate crimping cables and working with these little connectors, when I need to do something unusual like create a custom power cable that's going to go from a battery to the receiver and then over to the gyro, I can easily put that together. So one of those things that you put in your kit, in your in your toolbox or whatever, and you only need it once in a while, but when you need it, you really need it. And it would have been a lot harder to rig power for this without that setup and without the ability to make this. And then again, also the ability to take off the little white, I'm not sure the name of that type of interface, but it wasn't going to work with this setup. So I needed to switch over to some type of plug, And since I was already crimping up these, I think they're called JT connectors, it was easy just to make a power connection right there. So, okay, well, let's have a look. The receiver is right in there, and I've got one antenna whisker coming out through the bottom, straight out the bottom. I only land in grass, so I'm not worried about that. And this whisker will go through a hole in the canopy, straight out the top. And I have the satellite receiver right here, and that has a whisker coming out on the left and the right. So pretty much any angle and front or rear, I'm going to have an antenna facing the radio one way or another. This is not hard mounted. I just drilled 2 small holes, used a tweezer to feed the antennas, get them started, and then pulled them through, and just pulled it till it was in a position where I liked it. So it's just being held on by the antennas. The antennas are held with a little bit of hot glue. The gyro is 2-sided taped in place. I cut a piece to the exact shape, so it's got as much surface area. It's quite stable. It's not going anywhere. The remote for that, the wire comes through here and to the front. I'm thinking about 2-sided taping this up underneath the canopy, so I can just take the canopy off and plug into it. I have tested the battery and this cable, and the flight pack works great, powers everything up, everything works really well, nice and strong. I was concerned about this ESC, that the heat sink was it wasn't covered, but this heat shrink that goes around it was up over the edge of the fins all the way around, so it was like a little window was cut in the top, so that air wouldn't flow easily through it. So I trimmed away some of the heat shrink tubing that goes around this to expose those fins a little bit better, so that, you know, air coming in through the side vent here will hopefully pass through and over the fins and help keep that cool. The fact that I am only using it for the motor, and that it is not going to be powering any of the electronics. And that was another thing that I did. The wire for the ESC, I pulled the ground wire and the power wire out of the connector. So of these, let's just say this is the line coming off the ESC, I only left the signal wire. I pulled these 2 off, folded them back, and taped them out of the way so they can't touch each other, and also so that they are not plugged in here, so that the only thing plugging into the receiver is signal. So I'm not taking power from 2 places, because remember I said I wanted to power the receiver off of its own battery. And if I had left these 2 wires, the ground and the positive wire, still in this connector, I would have been getting power from 2 sources, from this battery and from this battery via the speed control. So now the speed control is isolated. All there is the signal wire, and this battery powers all the electronics alone. Let's see, anything else interesting? And I definitely think that having a separate battery is a really good way to go. A lot of people who compete in like F5J, they'll have a small battery to power their motor with just large enough, low enough milliamp hour to be able to make the climb or a couple of climbs to altitude for the contest. And then the battery's empty, and that way they're bringing only the weight they need. And then they have another battery that just powers the electronics. So I definitely think that's a better option than using a standalone BEC, which is the next safest way to go. The least safe way to go is powering just off the BEC that's built into the ESC, in which case you are reliant on that and the one battery, and if the ESC burns out, your plane comes down out of control. At this point, it's all a matter of programming. Pretty much everything is built. I can't think of anything I have left to do at this point other than configuring and updating the software in the gyro, which I'll be doing, and I'm probably going to make a separate video on this gyro explaining how it works, how to use it, how to set it up, how to configure it. But that's not something really worth putting in this build, because this series of videos is focusing on the glider and not that piece of electronics specifically. So anyway, I'll cover anything that remains as far as this assembly, and then hopefully I'm going to be getting this to the field in the next 48 hours. Just waiting for some weather to clear. We've had clouds and or light rain for the last couple of days, so I'm hoping it'll clear tomorrow or the next day, and I can take this and get it airborne, and I will hopefully have a camera up on the wing, as well as wearing a GoPro on my hat, so that I can get you footage from the ground. It'd be nice to get some footage from the airplane as well.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell icon, you'll receive notifications every time I launch a new video. Thank you for watching.